How's it going, Charger fans? My name is Jamieson O'Marr, and for those of you who are not as familiar with me or are new to the channel, I am a fourth-year medical student at the Yale School of Medicine, and I'll be applying into orthopedics later this year. And I have been providing injury content / analysis for the Guilty as Charged podcast over the last season, and hoping to continue to do so throughout this off season and into next year as well. So I just wanted to give some updates of some new information that's been developing over the last couple of weeks as we've entered some more team-based activities and are looking towards training camp at the end of the month and into July. So we'll focus a little bit on the medical staff change-ups that have occurred for the Chargers organization over the last couple of weeks that we have kind of been made publicly known. Then we'll focus on JC's recovery and talk a little bit about the injury itself and what we can expect and how he's looking is what probably most of us are interested in now. I'll talk a little bit about Justin Herbert's labral injury. We talked about the ribs extensively last season, but we didn't really talk about this surgery that he had in the offseason in late January. So I'll talk a little bit about what that surgery was and any expectations / worries that we might / should have as Charger fans moving forward. Spoiler alert, there are none, but it's a little bit interesting. So hopefully you guys will learn something there. And then we'll do a quick hit on some of the more key players for the Chargers that had injuries last season and talk a little bit about where they are in their respective recoveries and what we can expect moving forward. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the Chargers let go of their head athletic trainer in February, I believe, Damon Mitchell. He had been with the organization for a number of years, I think over 20. Before his release, which is unfortunate. I mean, these players have long-term relationships with them, and not all injuries can be pegged on athletic training. In fact, in Staley's first year, the Chargers were actually among the healthier teams in the NFL. And as we've previously talked about, the good teams are able to kind of work through those injuries and still perform at a high level. So not all these kind of blame can be put on the medical staff specifically, but it was clear that the organization wanted to try something different after last season. So they let him go, and they promoted Marco Zucconi, who was a member of the athletic training staff with the Chargers, to Director of Player Health and Performance, which is a slightly different role. He's not the head athletic trainer anymore. He's sort of above that, and he's going to be observing the health of the players more broadly, I think including athletic training responsibilities, but also diet and other aspects of player health, which is interesting. I haven't heard of this role at other organizations yet, but it's kind of a novel thing. So we'll see how that plays out through this season. And then they hired Sal Lopez, who was an athletic trainer with the Titans for the last 4 or 5 years, I believe. The Titans were actually a pretty injured team last year, but the 4 years prior to that, they were among the healthier teams in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see how he incorporates himself into the Chargers organization. It's a new, fresh start. Again, not all injuries can be placed at the discretion of athletic trainers and stuff like that. They are freak things. Football is a tough, dangerous game, and these things happen. But hopefully some new blood, some new thoughts might help mitigate some of the factors that are under their control. So we'll see how that plays out this year. So let's talk about JC, the reason where most of us are here, most likely. So he had a patellar tendon tear in October, I believe. It was around week 7 that was subsequently repaired. That puts us now currently about 8 months from injury. That is roughly around the time of when we expect people to start returning to full mobility, start pushing the limits a little bit, but again, not doing full sports-based training. We want to make sure that the injured leg, the testing that they'll do is roughly in strength about 10%, within 10% of the uninjured leg in terms of ability to squat, for mobility, a comfort level for him. And that's when they would then start transitioning him from kind of gradually ramping up that into sports / team-based activities like 7-on-7 and things like that. Again, there's really no reason to rush it right now, as we do have 3 months before the season starts. He's meeting with his surgeon, I believe on Monday of next week, and that would put him about 8 weeks from injury. 8 months from the surgery. And that would be, again, the timeline that he was quoted was between 8 and 9 months, and he's looking really well. So let's take a quick look at this video. You see him exploding off that, slowing down on the quad. Actually puts a lot of pressure on that tendon when he's chopping back, returning, and then accelerating again. That's, again, explosive movement. which is really, really good to see. That means he's on time with our expected recovery timeline, if not a little bit ahead. There's no reason to rush this again. So I'm not entirely confident that he'll return to 7-on-7 anytime soon, potentially not even in training camp. But it is possible we see him get a little bit of run in the preseason just to get some game experience back. And in terms of week one, the question maybe we're all asking is, I would expect him to be at least physically able to play in those games. It might be too early to tell in terms of his comfort back in the system, getting back to game level speed. That does take some time for athletes. But in terms of a physical aspect, he's healing really well. And we could expect to see him around that timeline. I think in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season, I would expect to see him return to play, if not week one. So this is a great information that is coming out. And we'll get more information as we go through training camp as well. But this is really reassuring to see. Next, I wanted to talk quickly about Justin Herbert. We didn't really discuss this all that much because it came out after the season that he had this injury. So he had a tear of the labrum. And just to do a quick dive into anatomy before we watch this awesome video, the labrum is the soft tissue, sort of cartilage type tissue around your shoulder joint that helps secure it. So you have your humerus and the head of your humerus, and you have your glenoid, which is on the end of your scapula, your shoulder here. And then that is your shoulder joint. So all that mobility comes from there. You have a lot of muscles that kind of hold those two together and allow you to kind of have that flexibility. And then the glenoid and the labrum itself is the soft area of tissue around that provides a little extra cushioning on the edges. And he had a labral tear, which can be done any number of ways, likely a tackle, landing on the shoulder weird, anything like that. And that can cause some discomfort in mobility. This is, most importantly, his non-throwing shoulder. So it's his left shoulder, which means he's not ranging it as often, but you do need some mobility for throwing with that. And he had that surgery performed at the end of January. We're now about 5 months from injury. These injuries, after surgery, we expect some type of return to play about 3 months with strengthening in general. And as we can see when we watch this video here, he's clearly throwing without restriction, which is great to see. I expect him to be fully participatory in training camp, and I don't have any concerns about this injury moving forward. Most importantly, it's his non-throwing shoulder, so he doesn't need as much mobility there. So it's more of a comfort thing. But we can add this to the list of injuries that he was dealing with throughout the last season, and still at times performing at a super high level. So I don't, again, expect this to hinder him moving forward, and I do expect him to be a more active participant in training camp and things like that moving forward. And then finally, I just want to do a quick hit on some of the key players the Chargers had that had injuries over the last year. As we talked a little bit about, Joey Bosa had the groin repair. He came back at the end of last season, but it actually came out later that he had surgery on both sides, not only the injured side, but as they were doing the surgery, they also looked at the opposite groin and noticed that it was also weakening. So they repaired both sides, and he himself said that he's felt better now than he had in a long time. So it remains to be seen how that will translate to a full healthy season on the field. Hopefully that will be the case. But we'll have to, keep our eyes peeled on that. But Joey is at a good place now. Again, he was healthy towards the end of last season. He's had a whole off season on with 2 healthy groins to train and kind of prepare for the upcoming season. So he's, the stage is set, and we'll see how he responds to that moving forward. I'm optimistic, as are Steven and Tyler and some of the rest of the GAC crew, but we shall see. Jalen Guyton had the ACL tear, I believe, in week 3. This is, again, a soft tissue injury. It takes a little bit longer to heal. The rough quote is between 9 and 12 months. It's a broad range, but generally you don't want to rush these injuries because once they do the graft and the repair of these, it takes a long time for that graft to not only, they call it remodel. So initially they take a tendon, something from like a hamstring, and it has to remodel into a ligament. And that process takes a long time. Some of the data says up to 18 months until it's fully engrafted as a kind of a new ligament. But players can return to play before that, and they often do. So he's I believe he tore it a little bit earlier. So he's probably looking at about 9 months now, 10 months now. He's been seen doing some work on the side with trainers. I don't think he's been seen doing anything close to what we see with JCU in terms of running and change of direction, but that's kind of the next steps that we were expecting to see. He does have another 3 months of strengthening before. And because this injury was early on in the season, I do expect him to see him back at some point, hopefully early in the season. potentially week 1, but again, we'll have to get his comfort back on that knee so that he's not in a position where he's going to re-injure it or hurt himself due to his own kind of concern over it. So again, as soon as that leg is strengthened, he has all the quad and hamstring muscles kind of within 10% of his opposite leg, they will return him gradually to sports. And in terms of timeline wise, I'd expect that to be early in the season. There really is not kind of with the receiver help that the Chargers drafted in round 1, kind of probably a massive push to bring him back before he's really ready. But the speed will definitely be a welcome addition. I think they are relying a little bit on that. So we'll see him hopefully early on in the season, if not week 1. Austin Johnson, similar knee injury that everyone else had. Unlike Atito, who had the patellar tendon rupture exactly like JC, he had an MCL tear and a knee fracture that was actually a pretty kind of a more severe injury. We had a lot of MCL injuries last year. Trey Pipkins dealt with one. Josh Kelly dealt with one. This one was a more severe. Not only it kind of tore more, and also there was a fracture within the knee as well that needed to heal. He's been spotted doing work with trainers on the field. We haven't seen, again, him moving or cutting in terms of activities level yet, but we do expect to see him, I think, hopefully early on in the season. It might be a slightly delayed. They did sign another defensive lineman to kind of bring more depth there. So they're not, again, going to rush him back, but he was a stalwart piece on that D line. I do expect to see him at some point early in the season. I'm unsure if we'll see him quite active in training camp. I think that might be a little too tight of a timeline, but we got 3 months until the start of the season. I think that's a good 3 months, and it is potential that we see him in the first weeks of the season. Otito, similar boat. This is a patellar tendon tear, but he tore it actually a few weeks after JC. So he's a little bit farther behind. He has been spotted doing some work on the field, but he's not in that cutting motion yet. So unclear if we'll see him by week 1. Again, we still got a long time until the season starts, but he's still got a couple steps to hit before he's even able to kind of get into more aggressive activity and then team-based activity, and then eventually return to play. So he has got some more steps and hurdles that we have to go through. And I expect that to take a little bit longer. So don't hold your breath for week 1. Hopefully at some point in the first half of the season, we see him return to form. And then Slater, I just threw on here. It came out again after the season that he was ready to play the Chiefs if he was called upon. That biceps is well healed now. He's had a whole offseason to strengthen it. I really have no major concerns there going forward. And it'll just be exciting to see him back on the field, as I'm sure we all have been missing him on that left side. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks for tuning in to the Los Angeles Chargers injury update. Again, if you're interested in this type of content or you want to follow me on Twitter, you can see a lot more real-time updates during games and things like that. That's at Chargers Medical. I'll be posting kind of when new information comes out. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we don't see me too much this season, but it's been a joy to kind of work with the Guilty as Charged podcast and participate with these injury updates. So hopefully you learned something today. And until next time, guys, my name is Jamieson. Have a good night.